Hello and welcome in. I am the Eddie McCabe, and you are listening to Evenings with Eddie. Welcome to the first episode of Evenings with Eddie. I am super excited to be launching this show finally. Over the past few weeks, we have been doing the Disney Princess film series here on the channel, so you can follow those. Those drop every single Friday, where we've been deep diving, or more specifically, I've been deep diving into every single Disney princess from Snow White all the way up to the princesses in Frozen and Moana. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm really excited to kind of drop the first official episode of Evenings with Eddie here on the channel. It's something that I've been thinking about doing and wanting to come back to quite a bit. For somebody that might be new to this or new to who I am Eddie McCabe. I'm a freelance television and video producer in the Boston area, and I've been podcasting for quite a few years now. It started as a part of the New Age Insiders. New Age Insiders was a pro wrestling themed podcast where I hosted as Liam Stryker with Chris Magoo and as Jason Maltov and Bill Neville. The three of us were the New Age Insiders, where we covered everything under pro wrestling. As a part of that venture, basically, I, along with Bill Neville, hosted a show called Late Night Liam, which was a late night talk show style podcast, and we'd cover all sorts of things, have different wacky guests on, and do weird things like try the ultra mega quadruple stuffed Oreo and stupid nonsense like that. And I really loved doing that show. I thought it was very fun and very engaging and very entertaining. So I have decided to basically reincarnate it as Evenings with Eddie, because the New Age Insiders and the New Age Insiders Network no longer exists. You can still find it on the archives of New Age Insiders on Podomatic and, iTunes and Google Play and all those things, but, we're not producing new episodes anymore. So to kind of scratch that itch, I've decided that I'm going to start this podcast. So basically, we are going to talk about anything and everything, from pop culture all the way up to, comic books and movies and things like that. So strap in. It should be a very, very fun and wild ride. So let's just jump right in with our first topic. Over the past couple of weeks, we've gotten some major news outside of Walt Disney World. The very, very famous Splash Mountain, a very iconic ride, one of the mountains of the Magic Kingdom, as they call it, they've decided to retheme it. Basically, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, the history of Splash Mountain is tied into a movie called Song of the South. Song of the South is a fairly problematic movie, so problematic, in fact, that it's not even on Disney's over-the-top streaming service, Disney+. While films like Dumbo are on there but have a disclaimer in front of it to just kind of give you the heads up that there is some racially sensitive content as a part of the experience, Song of the South is just omitted entirely, and for good reason. As somebody who has seen the film out of, curiosity more than anything, because you hear that Splash Mountain is based off of Song of the South. Oh, that's a movie. I'd love to go see it. I love Disney movies. And then you are told, oh, it's very racist and very problematic. And as a adolescent, you want to see it more, right? So I've definitely seen the movie, and yeah, it is very, very problematic, right? The tones in the film are very, very tough to deal with. The depiction of African Americans in the South post-Civil War are really tough. There's caricatures in this film that are really, really tough. And so anything outside of the animated segments is very, very tough, right? Especially to watch, and it's not necessarily appropriate in the times that we're living. Where something like Gone with the Wind is pulled off of HBO Max, but will later be, put in with context and brought back eventually. Song of the South doesn't really have a place on Disney Plus, especially it being such a family-friendly streaming service, right? It's not something you want kids to stumble upon. It's not something that really kind of is worth watching anymore. And outside of the novelty of the animated characters being a part of Splash Mountain, there's not really a lot of longevity or staying power when it comes to the movie. So the decision to change the theme park attraction of Splash Mountain away from Song of the South, I think, is ultimately a great decision. I think that having a theme park attraction that brings up more questions and is unnecessarily, shady in terms of its heritage, I think it doesn't have any place in the Disney parks, right? You look at Disneyland and you look at Disney World, it's the happiest place on earth and the most magical place on earth. So having those two places being so family centric, having to have an unnecessary conversation is not worth it in 2020, right? I think that we as a society have kind of grown past those type of racial insensitivities, and we should move past it. Also, one thing that Walt Disney had always said is that the parks need to constantly be changing and evolving, right? And I recently, within the last year, I went to Disney World and I rode Splash Mountain because it is so iconic. It is one of my favorite rides. So being on it and enjoying it for the nostalgia, for the log flume attraction that it is, and for the fun that it is, you watch it and there are so many technical problems with it, right? Because the animatronics are very, very old. This is a ride that is over 30 years old at this point. And while it does shut down for refurbishment, it hasn't shut down for the type of refurbishment that even newer attractions like Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin in Tomorrowland in the same park has gotten an overhaul treatment, right? The animatronic that was Buzz Lightyear is not the same that it was when the ride opened. So the technology that animatronics have been able to achieve in recent rides and in recent parks, or in recent attractions in the parks, they've grown immensely. So these very basic movements when it comes to the Splash Mountain animatronics is very dated, right? They're not fluid. They're very jumpy. It's very much that, jokey Disney animatronic, that you see satirized in different forms of media. And so if you're going to shut it down to basically overhaul the whole thing and put in new animatronics, then it's probably about time that we retheme the ride. Something that I point to all the time when I've heard the debate about Splash Mountain being rethemed, not being rethemed. I look at Maelstrom over in Epcot at the Norway Pavilion, right? Maelstrom was a very, very popular ride. It was very fun. It was fantastic. It was one of the only rides at the time in World Showcase. So having a fun, engaging ride go away was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking. It was sad to see. But what Disney had decided was they were going to incorporate more of their intellectual properties into the parks. So they decided to incorporate the extremely popular Frozen franchise into the Norway Pavilion. And while, as a person who enjoys Maelstrom and was a very big fan of the ride, I understand that things need to go and change, as a part of growth, right? If you want people to keep coming back to these parks and you want people to, enjoy it time and time again, things need to be changed and refreshed, and you can't constantly be tearing down rides and building new things. You just don't have the space for it. So you do have to repurpose show buildings and tracks and layouts and things like that. So, watching them transform Maelstrom into Frozen was fantastic, right? And now I'm sitting here as somebody who is a huge fan and is recently, right? Because I'm an old person at this point, right? But I've watched my favorite rides that I remembered going to the Disney parks when I was a kid. I've been watching them slowly, one by one, go away, right? My favorite ride of all time, because I am such a movie nerd, is the Great Movie Ride that was at Hollywood Studios. That went away, right? And that movie show. Tune in. I host a movie show called That Movie Show. Shameless plug. But the Great Movie Ride was inside the Grauman's Chinese Theater at Hollywood Studios, and it was very outdated. It was very corny. If you didn't love movies to the way that I love movies, this ride is boring, right? And it needed to be updated. It no longer fit what the park of Hollywood Studios was representing or turning into, right? So having it change over to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is exciting, right? It makes me excited to now go because I want to see what they did inside that show building. I want to see this ride. I'm excited for something new. It's changing. It's exciting. It's Mickey Mouse. And I understand that while my memories and, my personal feelings of this ride are, they are what they are, things need to grow and things need to change. Things can't be what they are forever. And so for Splash Mountain to basically need to change and be a completely different ride is exciting, right? Because you look at the technology with something like Frozen Ever After that replaced Maelstrom, you now get to see what they're going to do with something else inside that space, because everybody loves the log flume. And so Disney has announced that what is going to be rethemed from Splash Mountain is going to be Princess and the Frog. Now, I haven't gotten to Princess and the Frog yet on the Disney Princess film series. As of recording this, it's not this week's episode. It is next week's episode, right? So we're pretty close, and so we'll have a little bit more of a full in-depth breakdown on the Disney Princess film series. But a little bit of a spoiler as to something that I do remember from this film is this movie is beautiful, right? It is the last hand-drawn princess animated feature film. Tiana, she is an amazing character, right? The movie is absolutely fantastic from top to bottom, and it's a shame that people, didn't take to it as much as they should have when the movie aired or was released originally. But now that it's on Disney Plus and it's fully accessible, I highly recommend watching it because the music is fantastic. It takes place down in Louisiana, in New Orleans. I went there once, so I could say Nolans, right? But, you look at it, and the animation is beautiful. The songs are jazz-inspired. The animation is gorgeous, and the characters are really fun and engaging. So I'm really excited to see how they transform this ride, because not a whole lot of the exterior needs to change. If you see the movie, it takes place in a swamp, right? And so while maybe the removal of the iconic Briar Patch is something that needs to happen, not a whole lot needs to change. And I'm very excited to kind of see what they're going to make of this. You look at the team that is behind it, and it's an A-team of Disney Imagineers. It's an absolute dream team. And going into that, they even brought John Rhodey out of retirement, right? An all-time Imagineer. And, he's come out of retirement to help this. So, their effort level on this is not going to be some quick, cash grab refurbishment. It's clearly something that they've definitely thought about for a while. It's something that has been in the works for a while, because when they announced it a few weeks ago, they had concept art already made, right, of what the outside is going to look like, or what they hope the outside is going to look like. So I'm excited to see what this new phase is, because one thing that my friends and I have always debated, right, is why haven't they integrated more things into the park? Disney owns so much, right? You have Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Hollywood Studios and in Disneyland, in California. And it's just this immersive land that takes you into the world of Star Wars, right? They're building the Marvel Avengers campus at Disneyland and at Disney parks outside of Walt Disney World. But they're building a bunch of Marvel themed lands. They already have Toy Story Land. Pixar has been a huge influence, and so having these properties that people love and want to see and want to be a part of and inside, it's it's something that I can't wait to see them actually integrate into their parks. It's something that they've definitely been integrating slowly, but you can now see that they've kind of shifted into a new gear. And it's really unfortunate that COVID happened in 2020, because we were going to get a lot of really cool things leading up to the 2021 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. There was going to be the Tron roller coaster. There was going to be the Ratatouille ride, the Mary Poppins ride. We were going to get close to having the Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster finished, a refurbishment where it comes to the Spaceship Earth, the entirety of the Epcot replacement, the whole reimagining was going to be crazy, and so I think that they've really started to lean into their properties, and I'm very excited to see that Tiana and Princess and the Frog are now going to be represented prominently in the parks. Formerly, all of the princesses had an attraction, right? Most of them do. Little Mermaid has a couple. Beauty and the Beast has a couple. Cinderella, Snow White. They, even have Sleeping Beauty. They have park icons and rides and, meet and greets and stuff. And, Tiana was always kind of outside looking in. And it's going to be really exciting to see her in her full glory. Now, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with that entire area. I've heard Disney people talk about wanting to retheme a lot of that Critter Country area into a New Orleans. And yeah, I think that the sky's the limit, especially with a property like that. While Song of the South and Splash Mountain aren't timeless for obvious reasons and reasons I spoke about earlier, Princess and the Frog is, right? Tiana is, because she is a Disney icon. She is a Disney princess, so her staying power is going to be a lot heavier than Song of the South, which is a very problematic, racially charged film, and while there's nothing racist in the ride, and if you have the opportunity to go before it closes, definitely get down to Disneyland or Disney World and ride Splash Mountain, because it is worth it, right? It's a very fun, iconic ride. But yeah, it's going to be sad to see it go, but I'm even happier to see what's coming. So one more touched on point that I'm kind of excited to touch on before we jump into our main story is that the Washington Redskins, the NFL football franchise, has decided that it will replace its logo and nickname, right? So they will no longer be the Washington Redskins. Now, after what feels like decades of people wanting to get this name change for racial insensitivity, it feels like it's finally going to happen. I am excited to see what happens with the name change for the Washington Redskins. It's a long time coming. I think that it shouldn't have taken this long, just because, it's not like the Florida State Seminoles where they're tied to an actual Native American tribe. It's just a insensitive nickname, right? And I don't think that the Washington Redskins hold enough tradition to warrant keeping it as long as they have, right? That being said, I think that the only answer to what they can change their name to is the Washington Sentinels, based on the fantastic movie starring Keanu Reeves, The Replacements. And on night one, they should retire the Shane Falco jersey, number 16 in your programs, number 1 in your heart, because Keanu Reeves should retire the jersey number 16 for the Washington Sentinels, because that's the type of fun I wish we had in real sports. And it's the type of fun that I wish we could have in 2020. Hopefully there is some good things that kind of come out of this. I don't think that Dan Snyder necessarily needs to give up his entire football organization, but he's definitely making the right move here. It's about time, and I'm really excited to kind of see what happens with the new merchandise and, the new logo for the Washington Redskins. Now going on to our main story. It is inspired by my friends over at the Warped Shelf. They were talking about specifically Sonic the Hedgehog, the film that is based on the beloved video game character. And I just wanted to kind of touch on video game films because it feels like we are getting into an area of, video game films, and it's very similar to where we were with comic book movies prior to Iron Man, right? Prior to Iron Man, we had jokey Captain America. We had a couple of Fantastic Four movies. Batman, which had everything from The Dark Knight. I guess The Dark Knight was after Iron Man, so everything from, George Clooney and Nipple Suit Batman all the way back to, Keaton, and Jack Nicholson. So it's very interesting. It was very hit and miss. It was very jokey, very cartoony. It was something they leaned into. And it wasn't until Iron Man and kind of the MCU came along that we really felt that we were getting somewhere with these films, right? That we were moving in a direction where they weren't just, nonsensical messes, and instead actual movies that people could go and enjoy and want to watch over and over again. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at with video game movies, right? You look at the first video game movie was Super Mario Brothers. Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo in 1993 released the Super Mario Brothers movie. Now, you look back in that particular movie, and that's going to be a little bit of a theme when it comes to these video game movies into the early portions of this conversation. It feels like these movies were not made by people that understood their source material. Much in the same way that comic book movies, I don't think in the beginning were made by people that understood their source material and just saw that they were, cartoons on a page. Right? I think that these are 3D, you saw Super Mario, and while Super Mario back in 1993 isn't the Super Mario that we have today, there's more lore and more things to pull from, but I just feel like this was just a cash grab to kind of hype on the Super Nintendo and the console wars of the 90s than it was to actually tell a compelling story with these characters. I think that overall, when you're talking about video game movies, the selection has been absolutely atrocious, right? Because you're talking about movies you're talking about games that don't necessarily have strong narratives that will tie you into caring about the characters, right? Because, Double Dragon is about two brothers that are fighting to save a girl, and then they fight each other to the death, right? That's what the game is. And so when that's not much of a narrative. It's not much of a story. There's no character plot, no development. Something like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, two of the largest, video game franchises ever, and certainly of the mid-90s into the late 90s, they're fighting games. Right? And so what makes those games fun are not the narrative, right? It's not a cohesive story and character building that would hook you in to wanting to watch it and getting invested, because you have your favorite fighter, but let's just say your favorite fighter is not the main character of the movie. Well, then you're out of luck, right? Because you definitely won't care as much if the guy you like isn't the correct person. Stuff like House of the Dead, right? House of the Dead is a rail shooter with a light gun that you stand in front of. Awesome, super fun arcade game. It's really fun to play. It's a quarter-eating machine, back when those were a thing. But there's no story, right? The fun part about that is the excitement. There's no real narrative that kind of goes with that sort of game. They've leaned more and had better success with horror-based games. The Resident Evil first movie was not bad. I even liked the second one, the Resident Evil Apocalypse, I believe it's called. That was even a ton of fun. It leaned a little bit more into the video games, but then, it goes off the rail and tells its own story and doesn't actually stick to anything and is kind of its own weird, separate universe. And that's fine, but it's just, it doesn't help you get invested. Doom is a first-person shooter, and the fun part about that is all of the gore and violence that you're going to be able to see, right? And so I don't think that they've done a great job at telling compelling stories inside the worlds that people care about. Now, I think in recent years, we've had much better success, more specifically in the most recent 2 movies, right? The first one being Detective Pikachu. So Detective Pikachu was just interesting, mostly because you got to live in the Pokemon world, right? Now, when I was in elementary school, that's when Pokemon came out, right? The red, blue for the Game Boy. That was our game, and we absolutely loved it. And while they've done a great job with the anime, right? And the adventures of Ash Ketchum and his, spunky Pikachu. That's been fantastic. They just took their first dive into a live action version of Pokemon. And it was exciting to watch. Now, I don't think necessarily the technical execution of the movie was great. There were 2 different movies going on. There was the one where Ryan Reynolds was in as Detective Pikachu, and that movie seemed fantastic. But then there was the movie everybody else was in, and it seemed very goofy, and it seemed very nonsensical. It wasn't meshing well, but it was cool to see the Pokemon world. It was cool to see these creatures in action, actually existing. It was really fun and kind of cool to watch, and it felt like it was a step in the right direction. It felt like the people that were making this Pokemon movie understood the source material. They understood what they were trying to achieve and trying to tell a story in this world. Now, the next one is Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, when Sonic the Hedgehog was originally released, the trailer was originally released, the character model for Sonic the Hedgehog was nightmare fuel, right? It was absolutely, absolutely terrible. And the internet freaked out, myself included, right? Because you are talking about a character that has countless mediums, countless video games, has spanned just as long, almost as long as Mario, and maybe just as beloved. So for that character model to be so wrong, it just showed that this movie wasn't being created by people that understood what they had and was just more of a cash grab. Something that I talked about is specifically with this movie as well as the Power Rangers movie that came out a few years ago is I don't know who this was for, right? Because you look at the Power Rangers movie that came out a few years ago, it was the characters for my Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, right? The original red, blue, green, black, yellow, pink, those Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And the suits didn't look like they looked weirdly hybrid Iron Man, and everything just kind of seemed off, and it didn't seem like they were trying to nostalgia hit me outside of the names and the basic description of it. But there are kids now that live with a version of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And now, excuse me, I don't remember which one they were on. I think it's a Beast Morphers currently. But basically, that's the current Power Rangers generation. So you didn't make a movie with the Beast Morphers, but you also didn't make a movie for me with my generation of Power Rangers. So who was this for? Because if you tried to hit both of us, you didn't really hit either of us. And so it was the same thing with Sonic, right? if this character model you ultimately got wrong, so who are you making this movie for? Who was the intended audience? And so it's really going to be interesting to see where we step forward, because even in the actual Sonic movie, it was very buddy cop, and it was that, thing that poor James Marsden is in, where he gets paired with a CGI character, and it's just wacky that he's with this cartoon character, and he's a far better actor than that. And so I wish he was in a better movie, but I hope that they kind of pick up a little bit more of the narrative style games to make them into movies. And there's a huge plethora of those games. Ones that are kind of slated. Now, again, Corona in 2020 just kind of, derailed all these projects, so I'm not 100% sure when they're going to be released. But you have a movie like the Uncharted games, or a movie based on the Uncharted games, and that's exciting. That's a very narrative-based game, right? While you're playing a character and sneaking around and shooting stuff and getting into firefights, and it's all very exciting to play, you're basically going from cutscene to cutscene and pushing a narrative along. So it'll be very interesting to see how you basically have the script tied to each other, right? You don't necessarily need to, do much legwork when making the game. And it'll probably be far better than one of the other ones that's slated for a 2022 release, which is Minecraft. The whole point of Minecraft is a game which you could create anything, right? Now, I don't play Minecraft specifically, so I can't really speak to the nuances of it. But from what I understand, the appeal of that game is to just create stuff. It's like digital Legos, basically, where it's like, yeah, you can create this house, or you can create some, fire-breathing swamp frog or something. And having that freedom is what makes that game fun, but there isn't necessarily a narrative that's driving you to do things. So it'll be very interesting to see what ends up happening with that, because a game that I've always hoped for and has been in, development hell forever is the Metal Gear Solid games. And I want to see a Metal Gear Solid game movie. Metal Gear Solid 1, I just want to see it. Or give me a show. Give me a television show. You don't think you can do it? We live in a world where streaming services are aplenty, right? Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus. There's so many outlets that you can put one of these things on as a television program that if you feel like you can't tell the story of Final Fantasy VII in 2 hours, then don't, right? Put it as a part of a mini-series. Put it at, Final Fantasy is a perfect example of something that could exist on Netflix, right? There are countless games that have long, sprawling narratives that you could just enjoy in a American Horror Story like, micro season, right? It's going to be 8 episodes, and we're going to tell the story of Final Fantasy VI. And then next season it's 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 15. We'll skip 14 because that's a weird online MMORPG. But I think that we've now reached a point where the people that are producing these movies are the people that grew up with them, right? Very similarly to, like I said, with the MCU before. You have a bunch of filmmakers that have grown up now, right? Ryan Reynolds loves Deadpool. And so when he made Deadpool, he made a true Deadpool movie. It wasn't some older executive that was like, the kids like this Deadpool, let's make their version, let's make a movie of it and, cash in. It's people making stuff for the fans, by the fans. And I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see where we go because, the people that redesigned Sonic and designed all of the Pokemon and Detective Pikachu give me hope that we'll be able to tell an exciting story going forward, right? We'll be able to tell some fun and exciting video game stories that we've all played and can now actually enjoy on the big screen. So I want to hear from you, right? You can comment down below. You can find me at the Eddie McCabe on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I am anywhere and everywhere. But I want to hear from you. If there's a video game movie that you want to see, what are some of your favorite games that you think should be adapted into the movies? I want to hear what games you think shouldn't have been adapted into a movie, right? Tell me why Mortal Kombat Annihilation was terrible, because it absolutely was. But you can follow me on all forms of social media at the Eddie McCabe. We will be releasing this every Wednesday, the main show here, Evenings with Eddie, and we will be releasing the film series every Friday. Stay tuned as we develop new content that is going to be a mix of sketch content, interviews with guests. I have some pretty cool ideas and some pretty exciting stuff on the horizon that I really want to share with you, and I really kind of want to show the world that, we want to build something really fun and exciting here, and I'm excited to start this journey with all of you. So thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Evenings with Eddie, and I'll see you real soon.